Introduction. Imagine a world where a single dynasty's rise and fall would shape the fate of millions, spark revolutions, and ignite a golden age of science and culture, only to be nearly erased from Western memory. The Abbasid Caliphate, once the beating heart of the Islamic world, is a name that rarely surfaces in everyday conversation. Yet its legacy is woven into the very fabric of our modern lives. How did a family, descended from the Prophet's uncle, seize control of one of history's greatest empires and transform it into a center of power, knowledge, and intrigue? And why did their story end in such spectacular ruin, with their capital city left in ashes and their libraries drowned in ink? For 5 centuries, the Abbasids ruled over a realm that stretched from the Atlantic to the borders of China. Their courts dazzled with wealth, their scholars preserved and expanded the world's knowledge, and their armies clashed with the mightiest empires of their age. But beneath the surface, the Abbasid world was a cauldron of ambition, betrayal, and secret plots. Whispers of forbidden alliances, shadowy assassins, and lost treasures still echo through the ruins of their once great cities. Today, we peel back the layers of myth and legend to uncover the real story of the Abbasids, a tale of ambition, brilliance, and ultimate catastrophe. What secrets did they guard? What mistakes led to their downfall? And how did their forgotten legacy shape the world we know today? The answers may surprise you, and the journey is just beginning. But to understand the Abbasids, we first have to witness the chaos and discontent that set the stage for their dramatic rise. The fall of the Umayyads, seeds of revolution, long before the Abbasids unfurled their black banners. The Middle East was ruled by the Umayyad Caliphate, a dynasty that seemed invincible, yet was quietly rotting from within. The Umayyads had built an empire that stretched across continents, but their rule was marked by deep divisions and growing resentment. At the heart of their power was a privileged Arab elite, a small circle that controlled wealth, land, and influence, while millions of their subjects, non-Arab Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians, were pushed to the margins. These groups, labeled as dhimmi, were forced to pay extra taxes and accept second-class status, fueling a sense of injustice that simmered for decades. Even those who converted to Islam, known as mawali, found themselves locked out of real power, treated as outsiders in their own empire. The Umayyads' grip on authority grew tighter, but so did the anger of those they ruled. Rumors began to swirl of secret gatherings, whispered promises of a new order, and underground networks plotting to overthrow the regime. Discontent wasn't just a matter of faith or ethnicity, it was about survival, dignity, and the hope for a better future. As the years passed, the cracks in the Umayyad foundation widened, rebellions flared up in distant provinces, and the once mighty caliphs found themselves besieged by enemies both inside and outside their own palaces. The white banner of the Umayyads, once a symbol of unity, became a target for those who dreamed of revolution. In the shadows, a new force was gathering, one that promised justice, equality, and a return to the true spirit of Islam. But the world had no idea just how far the coming storm would reach, or how violently it would sweep away the old order. And as the black banners began to rise in the east, the fate of the Umayyads was sealed. But who were these mysterious challengers, and what drove them to risk everything for a new beginning? The answer would change history forever. The black banner rises, the Abbasid revolution, and the chaos left by the crumbling Umayyad dynasty. A new symbol began to haunt the imagination of the Islamic world. The black banner. It was more than just a flag, it was a promise of change, a warning to the old order, and a rallying cry for the oppressed. Behind this banner stood the Abbasids, a family whose bloodline traced directly to Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad. For many, this connection gave them a sacred legitimacy, a claim to leadership that the Umayyads could never match. But the Abbasids were more than just heirs to a name. They were master strategists, skilled at weaving alliances and stirring hope among the discontented. At the heart of their movement was a shadowy figure named Abu Muslim. His origins remain mysterious. Some say he was a Persian convert, others whisper he was a secret agent sent to ignite revolution. What's certain is that Abu Muslim was a genius at uniting people who had every reason to distrust each other. Arabs, Persians, and Central Asians, warriors, scholars, and dreamers flocked to his cause, drawn by the promise of a new beginning. In the eastern province of Khorasan, where old grievances ran deep, Abu Muslim's call to arms spread like wildfire. The revolution was swift and merciless. The Abbasids' black banners swept across the empire, toppling Umayyad strongholds and shattering their armies. The final confrontation came at the Zab River, where the last Umayyad Caliph Marwan II made a desperate stand. Abbasid sources describe a battle of courage and chaos, with Marwan's cavalry charging headlong into a wall of spears. The Umayyad army broke, and Marwan fled inland to be hunted down and killed in Egypt. The victors showed no mercy. Surviving Umayyads were hunted, their graves desecrated, their legacy erased in a wave of vengeance. Yet, in the midst of this bloodshed, one Umayyad prince, Abd-ur-Rahman, managed a daring escape. He fled west, crossing deserts and mountains, until he reached Spain. There, against all odds, he founded a new Umayyad dynasty that would flourish for centuries. But in the heart of the Islamic world, the Abbasids now stood unchallenged, their black banners casting a long shadow over a new era. The revolution was complete, but the real challenge was just beginning. With power in their hands, the Abbasids faced a daunting question. How would they build an empire worthy of their promise? The answer would transform not just a city, but the entire course of history. Building an empire, Baghdad and the Golden Age with the Umayyads swept aside. The Abbasids faced a daunting task: how to turn revolution into lasting rule. Their answer was as bold as it was ambitious. Instead of clinging to the old centers of power, the Abbasids set out to build something entirely new, a city that would become the beating heart of their empire and a symbol of their vision. On the banks of the Tigris River, Caliph al-Mansur ordered the construction of Baghdad, a city designed from the ground up to dazzle the world. Officially named Madinat as-Salm, the city of peace, Baghdad was more than just a capital. It was a statement. Its circular design, grand gates, and soaring palaces announced that a new era had begun. Baghdad quickly became a magnet for talent, wealth, and ambition. Under the reign of al-Mansur's grandson, Harun al-Rashid, the city reached legendary heights. Stories of his court would echo across continents, blending fact and fable until it was hard to tell where reality ended and myth began. Harun al-Rashid, immortalized in the tales of 1001 Nights, was said to be a ruler of wisdom, generosity, and almost magical charisma. But behind the glittering facade, real power often lay elsewhere. One of the most influential figures of the era was not a caliph, but a woman, al-Qazuran, once a Yemeni slave girl, who rose to become queen and kingmaker. Her intelligence and political savvy allowed her to shape policy, command respect, and even receive foreign ambassadors. Some whispered that she was the true ruler behind the throne. The Abbasid court was a crossroads of cultures, where Persian traditions mingled with Arab customs, and scholars from every corner of the empire debated philosophy, science, and religion. The Barmakid family, descended from Buddhist priests in Central Asia, rose to prominence as viziers, guiding the caliphs and helping to create a government that blended the best of many worlds. But the court was also a place of danger, where fortunes could rise and fall overnight. When the Barmakids' influence grew too great, Harun al-Rashid turned on them, ordering their sudden downfall in a move that shocked the empire. Yet, for all its intrigue and ambition, Baghdad was a city of wonders. Its markets overflowed with goods from distant lands. Its streets buzzed with poets, inventors, and dreamers. The city's very existence was proof that the Abbasids were not just conquerors, but builders-architects of a golden age that would leave a mark on history. But beneath the surface, new challenges were already taking shape. As Baghdad's fame grew, so did the ambitions of those who walked its halls. The next chapter of the Abbasid story would be written not just in palaces, but in libraries, laboratories, and secret chambers, where knowledge itself became the greatest prize of all. Knowledge, power, and intrigue. The House of Wisdom in the heart of Baghdad, behind the city's golden domes and bustling markets, stood a place that would change the course of human history. The legendary House of Wisdom. More than just a library, Beit al-Hikmah was a beacon for the world's greatest minds. A sanctuary where scholars, translators, and inventors gathered to unlock the secrets of the universe. Here, the Abbasids launched a revolution, not of swords, but of ideas. Ancient texts from Greece, Persia, India, and beyond were translated into Arabic, preserving knowledge that might have vanished forever. The works of Aristotle, Galen, and countless others survived the ages because of the feverish activity within these walls. But the House of Wisdom was more than a storehouse of old books. It was a laboratory of innovation, where original discoveries flourished. Mathematicians like Al-Khwarizmi laid the foundations of algebra and algorithms, while polymaths such as Al-Kindi explored everything from astronomy to psychology. The city's scholars didn't just copy the past, they pushed boundaries, challenging old beliefs and forging new paths in science, medicine, and philosophy. Their breakthroughs would ripple across continents, eventually fueling the European Renaissance centuries later. Yet, the pursuit of knowledge in Baghdad was never free from politics and intrigue. The Abbasid court was a place where ideas could be as dangerous as daggers. Religious debates raged over the nature of the Quran, and caliphs sometimes imposed their own doctrines, sparking fierce resistance. The Minna, or Inquisition, saw scholars imprisoned or worse for refusing to toe the official line. Even within the House of Wisdom, alliances shifted and rivalries simmered, as thinkers vied for patronage and influence. What's often forgotten is the diversity of voices that shaped this golden age. Women like Al-Khazran wielded real power, and Christian, Jewish, and Zoroastrian scholars contributed alongside their Muslim peers. Their stories, often overshadowed by the exploits of caliphs and generals, reveal a world far more complex and interconnected than the legends suggest. And when Baghdad's libraries were finally destroyed, centuries later, the loss was more than just books. It was the silencing of countless voices, the erasure of discoveries that might have changed the world even more. But for a time, the Abbasid capital stood as a testament to what could be achieved when ambition, curiosity, and power collided. The House of Wisdom was the crown jewel of an empire at its height. Yet, as the thirst for knowledge grew, so did the rivalries and dangers lurking in the shadows. The next storm would not come from scholars, but from soldiers, and the empire's greatest tests were still to come. War, betrayal, and civil strife. While Baghdad's scholars were busy unlocking the mysteries of the universe, the empire outside its walls was anything but peaceful. The Abbasid Caliphate, for all its cultural brilliance, was constantly at war, sometimes with foreign enemies, but just as often with itself. The frontiers were battlegrounds where Abbasid armies clashed with the mighty Byzantines, pushing deep into enemy territory and even forcing the Eastern Roman Empire to pay tribute. Yet these victories came at a cost, draining the treasury and stretching the caliphate's resources thin. But the real danger was brewing within. The Abbasids, like their predecessors, struggled with the question of succession, a problem that would soon tear the empire apart. Caliph Harun al-Rashid, determined to secure his dynasty, made a fateful decision. He named not one, but two sons as heirs, hoping to keep the peace. Instead, he set the stage for a brutal family feud. When Harun died, his sons Al-Amin and Al-Mum became bitter rivals. Advisors whispered in their ears, factions formed, and soon the empire was plunged into civil war. The struggle between the brothers was nothing short of catastrophic. Al-Amin, ruling from Baghdad, tried to cut his brother out of the succession, while Al-Mun, entrenched in Khorasan, marshaled his own forces. The conflict escalated into a siege of Baghdad itself, year-long nightmare of starvation, betrayal, and bloodshed. In the end, Al-Mun's army stormed the city. Al-Amin was captured and executed, and the caliphate was left scarred and weakened. But the chaos didn't end there. In the aftermath, Al-Mun tried to heal the wounds by reaching out to the Alids, descendants of Ali, and even named an Alid as his heir. This move, meant to unite the empire, only sparked new revolts and deepened old divisions. Meanwhile, the military was undergoing a quiet revolution of its own. The caliphs began to rely on Turkish slave soldiers, Mamluks, who were trained from childhood to be loyal only to their master. These formidable warriors soon became kingmakers, wielding power behind the scenes and intimidating rivals at court. The introduction of the Mamluks changed everything. Old Arab and Persian elites found themselves sidelined, their privileges stripped away. Tensions boiled over, and Baghdad itself became a stage for riots and conspiracies. The caliphs, once the undisputed rulers of a vast empire, now found themselves surrounded by enemies, sometimes even in their own palaces. The golden age of the Abbasids was beginning to tarnish, and the seeds of future turmoil had already been sown. But the true unraveling of the empire was still to come, as anarchy and rebellion swept across the land, threatening to tear the caliphate apart once and for all. Anarchy and fragmentation. The empire unravels as the 9th century wore on. The Abbasid Caliphate, once the world's unrivaled superpower, began to fracture from within. The very forces that had once fueled its rise now threatened to destroy it. After the chaos of civil war and the rise of the Turkish slave soldiers, the caliphs found themselves increasingly powerless, their authority slipping away with every passing year. The so-called Decade of Anarchy was a time of relentless upheaval. when the throne in Baghdad became little more than a prize for whichever faction could seize it. Turkish generals, once mere servants, now pulled the strings, installing and toppling caliphs at will. 4 rulers came and went in rapid succession, each one a puppet, each one meeting a violent end. The empire's vastness, once its greatest strength, now became its fatal weakness. Local governors, sensing the caliph's vulnerability, began to carve out their own independent realms. Egypt, the jewel of the empire, was among the first to slip away, falling under the control of a rebel Turkish commander who founded the Tulunid dynasty. In southern Iraq, a massive revolt erupted among the Zanj agricultural slaves from East Africa, who rose up in a desperate bid for freedom. Their rebellion raged for 14 years, devastating the region and crippling Baghdad's food supply. Meanwhile, in the east, a coppersmith named Yaqub al-Safar rose from obscurity to conquer much of Persia, founding the Safarid dynasty and halting only when confronted by Abbasid forces at the Battle of Deir al-Aqwal. Once the undisputed masters of a vast empire, now struggled to maintain even a semblance of control. Yet, amid the chaos, there were moments of resilience. Caliph al-Mu'tadid managed a brief resurgence, using both military might and shrewd diplomacy, most notably marrying the formidable Kater al-Nada, daughter of the Tuluned, ruler of Egypt. Her intelligence and regal bearing became legendary, and her marriage symbolized a delicate, new balance of power between the caliph and his increasingly independent subjects. But these successes were fleeting. Elsewhere, Abbasid authority collapsed entirely. Arabia fell into the hands of the Qarmaysh, a radical Shiite sect that shocked the Muslim world by attacking pilgrims and even stealing the black stone from Mecca in Central Asia. The Persian Samanids declared independence, ushering in the so-called Persian intermezzo, a time when native Persian dynasties ruled their own lands once more. The caliph, once the supreme leader, was now little more than a figurehead, his power overshadowed by ambitious viziers and military commanders. By the mid-10th century, the final humiliation arrived. The Abbasids, Shiite warlords from Persia, marched into Baghdad and reduced the caliph to a mere puppet, a relic of a bygone age. The empire that had once united the Islamic world was now a patchwork of rival states, each vying for supremacy. Yet, even as the Abbasids faded into the background, their legacy continued to cast a long shadow. But the story was far from over, and new powers were already gathering on the horizon, ready to reshape the fate of the Middle East once again. The Shiite century and the Seljuk resurgences, the Abbasid caliphs, faded into the background. The Islamic world entered a new and unpredictable era, one that some historians call the Shiite century. For the first time, rival Shiite dynasties rose to dominate vast territories, challenging the Sunni order the Abbasids had once enforced. The Abbasids, hailing from the rugged mountains of Persia, seized Baghdad and ruled in the caliph's name. But real power rested in their own hands. The caliph, once the supreme leader of the faithful, was now little more than a ceremonial figure, a living relic paraded at court while the Bidemirs made the decisions that shaped the empire's fate. But the Abbasids were not alone. To the west, the Fatimids, another Shiite dynasty, swept across North Africa, conquering Egypt and founding the city of Cairo as the heart of their own caliphate. For a time, the Muslim world was split between 2 rival caliphs, each claiming to be the true successor to the Prophet. This division fueled intrigue, rivalry, and even open conflict, as both sides vied for legitimacy and control. The Fatimids' rise was so dramatic that some chroniclers wondered if the Abbasids' era had ended for good. Yet, the tides of history were about to shift once more. Out of the vast steppes of Central Asia, a new force emerged, the Seljuk Turks, fierce, nomadic warriors. The Seljuks swept southward, driven by a mix of ambition and necessity, possibly spurred by climate change and the search for new pastures. Their military prowess was unmatched, and they quickly toppled the Ghaznavid Empire before surging west across Persia. In a stunning series of campaigns, the Seljuks captured Baghdad, overthrew the Badzan, and restored Sunni dominance. The Abbasid caliphs, though still suddenly found themselves at the center of a resurgent Sunni empire, their spiritual authority revived by the swords of their new Turkish protectors. But the Seljuk era was anything but peaceful. The arrival of the Crusaders from Europe brought new enemies to the region, as Christian armies seized Jerusalem and carved out their own kingdoms in the heart of the Muslim world. In response, a shadowy group emerged from the mountains of Persia, the Order of Assassins, or Shrouded in legend, these Ismaili agents struck fear into the hearts of rulers and generals alike, using stealth and subterfuge to eliminate their enemies. Their most famous victim, the powerful Seljuk vizier, Nizam-ul-Mulk, was cut down in a daring attack that sent shockwaves through the empire. The Seljuk period was marked by both triumph and turmoil. While they brought a measure of stability and unity to the fractured Islamic world, their own empire soon began to splinter, torn apart by succession disputes and the ambitions of local warlords. The Abbasids, for a brief moment, managed to reclaim some measure of independence, raising their own armies and defending Baghdad against siege, but the world was changing fast, and new threats were gathering on the horizon. Threats that would soon sweep away everything the Abbasids and their rivals had built. The next chapter would be written in fire and blood, as the Mongols thundered out of the east, bringing an age of devastation the world had never seen. Catastrophe. The Mongol invasion. Just as the Abbasids began to glimpse a fragile resurgence, a new and unimaginable terror swept across the horizon. The Mongols, a force unlike any the Islamic world had ever faced, erupted from the steppes of Central Asia, with a ferocity that stunned even the most hardened warriors. Led by the descendants of Chinggis Khan, the Mongol armies moved with lightning speed, leaving a trail of shattered kingdoms and ruined cities in their wake. The Khwarezmian Empire, once a formidable power, was the first to fall, its cities reduced to ashes and its people scattered or slain. But the Mongols were far from finished. By the mid-13th century, Hulagu Khan, grandson of Chinggis, set his sights on the ultimate prize, Baghdad, the heart of the Abbasid world. As Hulag's armies closed in, the Caliph al-Mustasim faced a choice that would decide the fate of his dynasty. Despite warnings and the Mongols' fearsome reputation for annihilating any city that resisted, the Caliph gambled on Baghdad's ancient walls and the loyalty of his people. It was a fatal miscalculation. After a disastrous sortie that left half the city's defenders dead, Baghdad surrendered, but the Mongols showed no mercy. What followed was a nightmare that would haunt the Islamic world for generations. For 40 days, the city was subjected to a relentless orgy of violence. Women and children slaughtered in the streets, palaces and mosques set ablaze, and the once glorious libraries of Baghdad reduced to smoldering ruins. Eyewitnesses described the Tigris River running black with the ink of countless manuscripts, centuries of knowledge and culture lost in a single, brutal stroke. The Caliph himself was forced to witness the destruction of his city before meeting a grisly end rolled in a carpet and trampled to death. As Mongol custom forbade the spilling of royal blood, the death toll remains unknown, but the devastation was absolute. Only a handful of Christians were spared, thanks to the intervention of Hulag's Christian wife, but for the rest of Baghdad, there was no escape. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 marked not just the end of the Abbasid Caliphate as a political force, but the collapse of an entire world order. The caliphs who survived fled to Cairo, where they lived on as powerless figureheads under the protection of the Mamluks. The city that had once been the jewel of the Islamic world was left in ruins, its people scattered, its legacy seemingly erased. Yet, even in defeat, the Abbasids' story was not entirely over. Their name would echo through the centuries, invoked by rulers seeking legitimacy and by historians searching for the lost golden age. But the age of the Abbasids, their brilliance, their ambition, and their tragic downfall, had come to a violent, unforgettable end. And as the dust settled over Baghdad's ruins, the world was left to wonder what might have been had the Mongols never come. Legacy. The ghosts of the Abbasids. The fall of Baghdad was not just the end of a dynasty. It was the closing of a chapter in world history. Yet, the Abbasids' influence did not simply vanish with the Mongol conquest. Instead, their legacy lingered like a ghost, haunting the ambitions of rulers and the imaginations of generations to come. In the centuries that followed, the Abbasid name became a powerful symbol, invoked by sultans, scholars, and revolutionaries alike. Even as powerless figureheads in Cairo under the Mamluks, the Abbasid caliphs were paraded as living links to a golden age, their signatures used to legitimize new regimes and their lineage claimed by those hungry for authority. But what was it about the Abbasids that made their memory so enduring? Part of it was the sheer scale of their achievements. For 5 centuries, they presided over an empire that stretched from the Atlantic to the borders of China, a realm where cultures mixed, ideas flourished, and the boundaries of science, art, and philosophy were pushed ever outward. The House of Wisdom, the bustling markets of Baghdad, The poetry and music that filled the caliphal council became legends in their own right. Even as the physical traces of their world faded, the stories remained, inspiring new generations to dream of lost grandeur and forgotten knowledge. Yet, the Abbasid legacy is also a cautionary tale. Their rise was built on revolution and promises of justice, but their rule was marked by the same struggles for power, the same betrayals and intrigues that had doomed their predecessors. Their golden age was real, but so were the divisions and conflicts that eventually tore their empire apart. The burning of Baghdad's libraries was not just a loss for Islam, but for all humanity, a reminder of how fragile civilization can be, and how quickly centuries of progress can be swept away. Today, echoes of the Abbasids can still be found in the architecture of Middle Eastern cities, in the pages of scientific texts, and in the very idea of a cosmopolitan, interconnected world. Modern leaders and movements continue to claim descent from the Abbasids, hoping to borrow some of their ancient prestige. But the true legacy of the Abbasids is more complex, a blend of brilliance and tragedy, innovation and loss, unity and fragmentation. So, what secrets of the Abbasids remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered? What lessons can we draw from their triumphs and their failures? As we look back on their story, we are left with more questions than answers. The ghosts of the Abbasids still wander the corridors of history, reminding us that even the mightiest empires can fall, but their influence can echo for centuries. In the end, the Abbasids' greatest achievement may not have been their conquests or their palaces, but the enduring spark of curiosity and ambition they left behind, a spark that continues to shape our world in ways we are only beginning to understand.